morning. Morning. I now call to order today's meeting of the Board of Supervisors for the University of Louisiana System. Ms. Carroll, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Busada? Here. Dr. Clark?
Here.
Dr. Condos? Mr. Davidson?
Here.
Ms. Donahoe?
Present.
Mr. Astis?
Here.
Mr. Leatherman? Here. Mr. Perkins?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Here.
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Romero?
Here.
Ms. Russell? Mr. Salter? Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Stokes? We have a quorum.
Thank you, Carol. Ms. Donahoe, would you now please lead us in invocation as we begin today's business?
Yes, thank you. Stand and bow with me as we pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunities that you afford us every day. Help us now as we deliberate on these very important matters for our university, faculty, and especially the students, that we will always seek to serve you and in so doing, serve these people that are so deserving. And Lord, we thank you for the blessings that you've given us. In Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Donahoe. May I now please have a motion and a second to dispense with committee deliberations and to meet as a committee of the whole? Moved by Mr. Stevens,
Second.
second by Mr. Romero. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Also, I would like to advise that if any member of the audience would like to make a public comment on an agenda item, please use the comment cards located on the table and give it to a staff member. At this time, we would like to express our thanks to President Geis for hosting our meeting and retreat today. We appreciate the hospitality and the planning it takes. Dr. Geis?
Thank you, Chair Pierre and President Henderson and members of the board. We're really thrilled to have you back up in Lincoln Parish today, and with my colleague and good friend, President Gallo. To have you up here really means a lot, to see our campuses, to get to meet our faculty, staff, and students. And so we do hope that you'll take a little bit of time before you start heading back, say, south or east or west, and maybe pass through our campus and see some of the great projects that have been developed over the past few years that really enhance our campus experience. I know you've got a long agenda today, but we do want to thank you for your service and providing the leadership for our system that you provide. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Dr. Geis, and thank you for hosting us today. At this time, may I please have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of our January board meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Donahoe,
Second.
second by Ms. Letherman. Any questions, any discussion? Any corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Just had a text that those watching online are having a hard time hearing. So I don't know if there's an adjustment we can make there or not, but I wanted to pass it along. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully that's better. Again, we are meeting as a committee of the whole, and everyone can vote on all items. Each committee chair will conduct the business of that particular committee. We start with a report from the grievance committee. Ms. Donahoe, would you please give that report for the meeting earlier today?
Yes. The grievance committee met earlier, and after careful review of the process used by the University of Louisiana at Monroe, the committee recommended that the grievance filed by Dr. Stacy Starks be denied. Madam Chair, I would like to offer this as a motion to accept the recommendation of the committee.
Is there a second to that motion? Second by Mr. Davidson. Is there any questions, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That motion carries. Does that complete your report, Ms. Donahoe?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you so much. I think you also have academic and student affairs. Would you please go over those items?
Yes, and I see that Dr. Khan has joined us. We have two items on the Academic and Student Affairs Committee agenda.
One item is consent and requires approval. The second item is a presentation. Dr. Janine Kahn, our Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, will provide the report. Dr. Kahn?
Yes, good morning, Supervisor Donahoe, Chair Pierre, President Henderson, and members of the board. We do have only one action item for your consideration and also a presentation which will require no action by the board. The one action item, agenda item F1, is a request from McNeese State University to award an honorary doctorate of humane letters to Mr. Charles Chuck Cleckley. The university would like to recognize their distinguished alumnus for his service to the state of Louisiana, as well as for his support of McNeese State University.
Are there any questions from the board to Dr. Kahn? If no one requires further clarification, I would like to recommend approval of item F1. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
It's moved by Dr. Clark. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Mr. Davidson. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? So that motion passes. Dr. Kahn?
Yes, ma'am. At this time, I would like to invite President Rick Gallo to join me at the table so he can introduce today's guest.
Still good morning. Good morning. I'm delighted to bring, and I'd ask Robin Miner and her team to come on up as I'm making the introduction. We were, as an HBCU, we are part of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. That is an organization that advocates on behalf of HBCUs, the public HBCUs in this country. The UNCF, the United Negro College Fund, does that work on behalf of private HBCUs. I got a call from Dr. Harry Williams, who's the CEO and president of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, telling me that there was an opportunity to have a call with a group called Partnership for Educational Advancement. They are an organization who can help you in capacity building. And what we have found, there's a saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. I will tell you that this engagement with the Partnership for Educational Advancement and the group of consultants that they have brought to support and do capacity building for Grambling is truly one of those teaching a man to fish moments. And so it is a great pleasure to introduce Robin Miner, who is with the Partnership for Educational Advancement, and she can tell you all about the great work that they are doing that will absolutely set Grambling State University up for great success in our future. So without further ado, Robin Miner.
Thank you, President Gallant. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today on the work that we have ongoing with Grambling State University. As he indicated, my name is Robin Miner, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Institutional Partnership and Engagement at the Partnership for Education Advancement. I have joining me here today several of my colleagues, Sharita Quimby, who is our Director of Institutional Partnership and Engagement Strategy, Isabel K.O. Sander, who's an Associate Director for Institutional Partnership and Transformation, and colleagues from the Thurgood Marshall College Foundation, Paquita Yardborough, who is the Executive Director for Capacity Building, and Sharisa Simpson, who is the Associate Director for Capacity Building. What I wanted to briefly talk to you about today is the ongoing work we have with Grambling. I am very proud to say Grambling is one of our cohort institutions that we are engaged with, and President Gallant is one of my favorite presidents to work with. We have found that the success of our initiatives are dependent upon the leadership at the institution, and we have that leadership demonstrated at Grambling. We are able to fund this initiative through a philanthropic donor, Blue Meridian Partners. And this transformation project started out with a donation of roughly $60 million that was geared towards supporting HBCUs and increasing social mobility of our people of color, lower income, first generation students. Recently, we were granted an additional $60 million to continue this project and hopes of getting an additional contribution later. As President Gallo indicated, we're in partnership with the Thurgood Marshall College Foundation and United Negro College Fund, who represents the private HBCUs. Thurgood Marshall, for those of you who aren't totally aware of what they do, many of you recognize them for the scholarship opportunities for students, but they actually represent 47 HBCUs and over 300,000 students. So the majority of our students that attend HBCUs are with the member institutions of Thurgood Marshall. In addition to the scholarships, they serve an advocacy role on behalf of the institution and provide all type of leadership and program opportunities for the students who attend those institutions. The Partnership for Education Advancement is a relatively new organization. We were formed about 5 years ago. Our president, Jim Runcie, is the prior Chief Operating Officer of Federal Student Aid. And Jim brought together a leadership team who have backgrounds in higher education to provide this level of support with the initiatives that we have ongoing. And one of the unique opportunities at the Partnership for Education Advancement is that we really do consider ourselves partners with the institutions. Our backgrounds span from admissions and enrollment to compliance to Title IV financial aid. And so we work alongside the institutions as we are helping them to enhance in the achievement of their institutional goals. Our mission, like that of our donor, is to increase social mobility, and we believe the best way to do that is through the support of HBCUs, which have demonstrated the progress that can be made when the support and resources are provided. And we do that by providing operational support, enrollment support, technological support. And as you can see on the slide, we have engaged in roughly 168 different initiatives with the institutions that we are working with. We're working with 25 institutions, predominantly Thurgood Marshall schools, but we also are engaged with a number of the private institutions. And we do this through a three-level concept. We know that we can't serve all HBCUs, so we have identified a small cohort of schools. We have 17 public institutions that we are considering our transformation partners, and Grambling State is one of those. And what that means is that we invest in a multi-year project. We work with the institution to identify what their specific goals and needs are, and then we provide opportunities to help support them in achieving those. There is a second level of support that we provide, which is in network solutions. And for those institutions that we can't offer a multi-year commitment to, we have a single solution that we can provide. An example of that was we created a customer relationship management system. And many institutions have this, but the uniqueness of our program was that we identify representatives from HBCUs who created the core for this CRM process. That core is then provided to the institutions and is 75% built. And then the other 25% is customized based on the institution's preferences. The uniqueness of that is that when you're in an environment where you have resource limitations and bandwidth capacity, many times achieving the technology that you want to achieve is limited because of the requirement of gathering the requirements to build such a system. This system brings it to the table with 75% of it built, and therefore the level of commitment required from the institution has been mitigated substantially. And then for all of those other institutions that we aren't able to touch directly, we want to provide knowledge sharing with them. We were involved in the merger between Delaware State and Wesley College, and we are developing a playbook that can be utilized by other institutions who want to follow that same model. All of the initiatives that we are engaging with the institutions, we're capturing that knowledge base so that we can make that available to all institutions that are available. So how do we go about this process? We look at each institution as a unique institution, and we want to basically go in and cater to the specific needs of that institution. So as President Gallant indicated, we work with some third-party service providers who have been in this business a very long time. We work specifically with Raphael Noel Levitz, which is known as RNL, and the McKinsey Group. And so when we decide to engage with an institution, the first thing we do is an assessment of that school. We want to find out exactly what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, what are the goals of the institution, and how can we best assist. This allows us to identify initiatives catered toward that specific institution. We also take into consideration the bandwidth at the institution. We have a saying at the partnership that when we go into schools, we tend to have the STP, the same 10 people. And when we're engaging in initiatives, we realize that a lot of institutions have the same people working across the university on multiple projects. So we want to identify what the bandwidth limitations are because we want to ensure the success of that. We then look at the specific institutional goals, look at the strategic plan, we look at what the goals are of the institution for the next 5 years, and we derive initiatives that would be supportive of those. We do not go in and pretend we know the best way to do anything or what an institution needs to do. We work alongside the institution to identify what the path forward would be for that institution. And then we look at the ability to sequence. Again, we have multiple initiatives. As you indicated, we have 168 initiatives that we have deployed. So we look at the best way to sequence them at an institution to, again, ensure success. And then we look at the alignment on the ROI. When you have a benefactor who is donating over $120 million, there are certain expectations as to the outcome of that investment. And so we work alongside the institution. We make sure they understand that as a result of receiving these funds, there is a commitment on behalf of the institution to provide the level of support that's needed for this to be successful. With President Gallup, we had a meeting on aspirational goal setting. We reviewed what the institutional goals were, and we came up with an enrollment target that at the end of this transformation effort we would like to achieve. We started with the year of 2020 being our baseline year, and Grambling had roughly 5,400 students. We came to agreement that we want to get that to 7,800 by 2026. So we have an ambitious goal of increasing enrollment by roughly 2,400 students. The institutional goals that we identified at Grambling when we went through the assessment are listed above. They wanted to maximize enrollment. They wanted to strengthen the academic profile of the students, align the program offerings, and they also wanted to improve student success outcomes. So these were the goals that we were utilizing and determining which initiatives we would identify to work with Grambling. Here you can see the third-party services that we are engaged with, the type of initiatives that we are deploying at the institution, and what the purpose of those would be. So with RNL, it's basically focused on the enrollment goals. We want to look at the marketing at the institution, and we want to be able to target the marketing and recruitment to those students who are more likely going to attend Grambling. We want to look at the strategic enrollment planning so that we can determine what the long-term strategy would be for the institution. It's one thing to get students enrolled into the institution, but you have to have the infrastructure and the other operational capacities to sustain keeping those students there and provide the educational opportunity that they are seeking. So with McKinsey basically did an assessment around everything beyond the enrollment aspect. So we're looking at the value proposition of the school. How do we take advantage of the branding and expand the branding? How do we identify the specific programs that they have? We're looking at the expansion of online digital. Many of our institutions realized during the pandemic that we had to quickly switch over to offering online programs. And so we are looking now, how can we improve that? How can we increase the enrollment at the institutions by building on the online programs? And that not only is looking at the program, but the technology that is required to support those. It also looks at what's required to support that student, which is a different type student than you have when the student is actually attending on campus. And then we're looking at advancement in career services. As I indicated, the student experience doesn't stop the day they enroll at the institution. The institution has to be in a position that they can ensure that student success. So we're looking at what advancement opportunities, what campaigns, what fundraising opportunities can we make more prevalent at the institution. And then career services, what type partnerships can we enter into to ensure that when the students graduate, that they have a road and a path forward of how they're going to utilize that education. We also have two smaller service providers that we are working with. Philem, which is looking at the website of the institution and trying to achieve search engine optimization. so that when a student goes to search for certain programs, certain characteristics of an institution that Grambling can support, that Grambling comes up in that. So we're working on the website. And then RAFTA is a student and parent engagement. Again, a lot of retention is based upon the experience that the student has at the institution. And so this particular technology is really what it is, because we're looking at our students in today's age, and everything is done on a telephone through technology. And so this improves that campus experience by engaging with them through this level of technology. And as you can see at the bottom, so far this year, we have invested roughly $1.5 million into Grambling through these particular initiatives. And as I indicated, this is the first year of a multi-year project. We are working very closely with President Gallard and his staff to identify additional initiatives as we move out into year 2 and year 3. This gives you a little bit more of the type of activities that occur in order to achieve the outcomes we are looking for in these particular projects. We want to align the institutional resources in order to have a level of change implemented. Advancing the website improvements, I talked about that. I talked about identifying which students are likely to enroll, and also looking at which students are likely to drop out, so that we can have retention efforts directed towards those students. Developing a strategic financial aid award program. Many of our students can only attend school with the assistance of financial aid. I know that firsthand. I started out as a work status student attending an HBCU. And so the importance of financial aid is critical. And one of the things that we're doing in this particular initiative is creating personalized financial aid videos. So when a student receives their financial aid package, they have a video that says, "Welcome, Robin. We look forward to you becoming a Grambling Tiger." We make it personal to them so that they automatically start to feel a connection from the very beginning of their exposure to Grambling. And then we are looking at how we can increase engagement throughout the life cycle and the funnel up front. So again, it starts with the enrollment funnel, but all of our initiatives are geared toward the success and retention of the students. With the McKinsey solutions, you can see what the focus are and value proposition. We are working with President Gallard on what his strategy is for increasing the brand at Grambling. We have several initiatives that are directed toward increasing that brand, looking at the program portfolio and determining how we can take best advantage of that. And then also the perception and satisfaction of the student. Again, there's one thing to get the student in the door, but you have to have programs and systems in place to ensure that that student retains and graduates from the institution. And online digital learning, I talked about a little of this before. We're looking at not only course design, but we're looking at how to engage with those students. We're looking at how to recruit additional students through the online program. And then advancement, we have a very robust program with President Gallard on how we are going to do campaigning and fundraising and take advantage of the brand and build on the brand that Grambling already has established. So a quick review of the work that we're doing. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to present to you regarding this work today. And I want to publicly thank President Gallard for his support in this work. We can only be successful through his leadership, and so I want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Ms. Donahoe, that concludes all items for academic and student affairs.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gallo, and thank you to your guests.
Or comment. I just wanted to express an appreciation, certainly for the support you're providing Grambling, but I think that what we saw here today is a blueprint that is certainly applicable to all institutions in terms of where they're going. I'm especially interested in this notion of social mobility, and I think it's referred to also as socioeconomic mobility. Sometimes I think that's separated economic. I'd love more information about the metrics that you use or plan to use to determine that ultimate success that you're being planned for. I know that a lot of discussion that takes place now, not just here but elsewhere, has to do not just with attainment or the certificate that is received or the credential that's received, but it's ultimately the success that takes place afterwards. And so anything that you can provide on that would be certainly helpful.
We can give you more detailed information. We have a research component of our organization that's responsible for that. I do know that we are looking at a 10-year net present value of how we're going to measure what that increase in social mobility has been. So we start with a baseline, and throughout this transformation initiative and other efforts, we are monitoring the increase of the population of the students that we are working with. But I'm not the research expert, I'm the engagement person, but we definitely can get you more information on what the details are surrounding that.
I'd really appreciate that. I think that one of our disadvantages historically has been an absence and lack of data that is useful in terms of understanding what is actually transpiring and happening. And I'm not sure we're collecting data right now that would be, again, informing this ultimate idea of social mobility. And I'd certainly like to. And so anything we can start to collect now that can inform us 2026 or whatever, I think would be helpful.
I want to thank you and your team for traveling this far as well, and want to thank President Gallo for living up to his commitment of creating partnerships. That is the key word we're looking at, not just a transaction, but a partnership. In order to get Grambling where we want to be, it's a series of partnerships, and that was the key part. And very interested in seeing the plan on the getting to 2,600 additional students, and along with keeping the retention, along with keeping the ultimate culture of the university and how that impacts housing and everything else. So I was glad to hear that y'all are attacking that particular issue, and that's a big one, but very excited about you guys traveling down here and this opportunity to see how this long-term investment will work.
No more excited than we are, and we're on track. I can say that, as I indicated, we've identified ROIs for all of the initiatives, and it's based on some of the historical data that we have, but it's also looking at the history of the institution. We know that a lot of all institutions lost students during the pandemic. We can see that many of our HBCUs are seeing an increase in enrollment, but they also are faced with some of the same, what I would consider reductions in high school students who are graduating, so we have to be smarter in how we recruit, and once we recruit, retain those students. So it is a multi-year project, and we are measuring, and we meet with President Gallo on a monthly basis to make sure that we're staying on track, and if there is anything happening on our side or the institution of bandwidth issues, then we address those. So it's being tracked very closely and monitored, and data is being provided to President Gallo.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Did anybody else have any questions or comments? Thank you so much, Ms. Meyer.
Thank you.
Is there any other business to come before this committee at this time? If none, then I'll hand it back to you, Madam Chair, and the Athletics Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Donahoe. At this time, Mr. Perkins will address the items under the Athletic Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have 4 items on the Athletic Committee today. All are consent agenda items. Mr. Janae will provide a brief overview of these items.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Campuses are requesting approval of the following. Item G1 from Grambling, contract with Paige Phillips, head volleyball coach, effective March 31st, 2023. Items G2 and G3 are from Southeastern, contracts with Frank Selfo, head football coach, James Reiser, head men's baseball coach, effective January 1st, 2023. And item G4 is from University of Louisiana at Lafayette, requesting approval of amended contracts for Robert Marlin, head men's basketball coach, Matt Deggs, head baseball coach, Gerald Glasgow, head softball coach, Michael Dismoro, head football coach, and Christopher McBride, head soccer coach. And these amendments are effective February 23rd of 2023. And those are the 4 items I have, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Janae. These agenda items have been reviewed by the staff and are recommended for approval. Of course, if any members have any questions or wishes to discuss this item, please let me know. Are there any questions, comments from the board? Any comments from the public? If
no one requires any further clarifications of the consent agenda items, may I have a motion and a second to approve items G1 to G4?
So moved, Stevens.
Have a motion, do I have a second? Second, Dr. Peterson. Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. Do we have any other business to come at this time? Mr. Janae, I have one question. The audit reports that you produced, are those going to we're going to go over those today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If not, that concludes the business of the athletic committee, and we will move to the audit report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Perkins. At this time, Vice Chair Robinson, would you please present the audit committee business?
We have two items on the audit committee agenda today. One's a consent item and another one is for discussion. Mr. Jeanette will present both. Mr. Jeanette?
Thank you so much, Mr. Robinson. The first item is a consent item. Item H1, University of Louisiana System's request to approve the proposed University of Louisiana System Board of Supervisors Audit Committee Charter. If you remember, Dr. Henderson presented a draft at our January 6, 2023 board meeting, and each board member has received a copy of the charter that is proposed in final form.
This agenda item has been reviewed by staff and is recommended for approval. Of course, if there's anyone who has any questions or comments, we'll be glad to take those at this time. Are there any questions or comments? Recognizing none, is there a motion? And Mr. Romero moves. Mr. Davidson seconds. Are there any objections? Without objection, that item is approved. Mr. Janae?
Thank you so much, Mr. Robinson. The next item is item H2, and this is a report only. University of Louisiana System report on internal and external audit activity for the period of December 1st, 2022 through February 17th, 2023. Earlier this week, each of you received a listing of internal and external reports completed by various auditors since the last board meeting. Also included in that summary are audits that are currently in progress and a follow-up timetable to ensure that recommendations made in prior reports are implemented. Again, this is a report only, and no action by the board is necessary. And if I could just take a minute of personal privilege, I would like to introduce our newest internal audit director, Ms. Rachel Davis from Grambling State University.
Welcome. That concludes your presentation? Does that conclude your presentation, Mr. Janae?
That is all the items I have.
Okay.
Mr. Robinson.
That concludes the presentations of the audit committee. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. At this time, we'll move to facilities planning. Vice Chair Basada, would you please address those items?
Thank you. We have 13 items on the Facilities Planning Committee that are all consent agenda. Mr. Bruce Janae will provide a brief overview of the agenda items by campus.
Thank you so much, Mr. Basada, for agreeing to chair today. I have 13 items, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. I would like to note that each president has provided detailed justification to support the namings that are on today's agenda. And campuses are now requesting approval of the following. Item I-1 from Grambling, enter into a grounds and facilities lease agreement with Black and Go Facilities to construct a new student welcome, student success facility, which is authorized by state law for them to do this. This agreement will expire when a substantial completion document is signed and all construction completed. They anticipate no later than December 31st, 2026. This project will create a 4-story, one-stop shop welcome enrollment services center and will include admissions, recruitment, financial aid, bursar housing, advertising, career services. This is going to be approximately a 60,000 square foot facility. Funding for the construction is available for this project would be approximately $25 million and financed with self-generated funds and the Higher Education Emergency Relief Funds. And I want to note that the university's land or property will not be used as security for this project. Item I-2 is also from Grambling, requesting approval to name the recording control room in the Conrad Hutchinson Performing Arts Center the Earl E. Forty Stevens Recording Studio. Mr. Stevens is a former student of Grambling and is now a multi-platinum artist, actor, and entrepreneur. Item I-3 is from McNeese, requesting to name the small conference room in the Business Conference Center the Candace Townsend Conference Room for Candace's unfailing dedication to McNeese for over 30 years of service, and that included dealing with a number of storms and hurricanes. Item I-4 from Nichols, approval to name several rooms in the Ellender Memorial Library. Room 149B, Deanna Hickman Falcon Computer Lab and Lounge. Room 150, Rev Communications Academic Classroom. The university wants to recognize both of these parties for their significant contribution to the university athletic department. Room 152 in Picola Hall Conference Room, name it Richard Dickey Barker, the third conference room. Mr. Barker is a member of the Nicholls State University Foundation, and he's been there for a while. He's very tenured in that, and he's been a very loyal and generous supporter of Nicholls State University. Item I-5 is from Northwestern, requesting to name the Center for Inclusion and Diversity the Gail Jones Center for Inclusion and Diversity. Mrs. Jones served 15 years at Northwestern as an admissions counselor, recruiter, and director of TRIO Student Support Services, Freshman Connection, and New Student Programs. Want to note that she was recently inducted into NSU's Long Purple Line Hall of Distinction. Item I-6 is from Southeastern to name office number 90 in Garrett Hall, the Joseph Chief Petalasco Zoe Multimedia and Distance Learning Studio. This gentleman served as a custodian at Southeastern for 18 years, starting in 1964. I want to point out that many of his grandchildren, many of whom are Southeastern alums, and led by the 2022 College of Business Alum of the Year, Don Monastere. University of Louisiana at Lafayette is requesting approval, item I-7, to demolish 5 buildings that have been damaged beyond repair by hurricanes and exceeded their useful lifespan. Want to demolish a couple of greenhouses, a snack hut, the Cade Solar House that's on the Cade Farm, and then a building at New Iberia Research Center. And you might think that some of these things are small items, but the state requires anytime you have a building and it has a state ID that you have to go through a process to demolish them, and it's got to be approved by the legislative congregation. And if nothing's noted within 30 days, objection, you can tear it down. Item I-8 is University of Louisiana at Lafayette, requesting approval to enter into a building lease with Raging Cajun Facilities for a portion of a building that's located on West St. Mary Boulevard to be able to renovate the 4th floor for their nursing program. This renovation will encompass approximately 21,000 square feet of new and renovated facilities, but not limited to a new floor plan to make the space suitable for their nursing program. Project is estimated to cost between $600,000 to $800,000. Look for completion date August of 2023. This project could be funded from pledges received by the University of Louisiana at Lafayette Foundation. Item I-9 is also from the University of Louisiana Lafayette, requesting approval to enter into a lease with Our Lady of Lourdes Regional Medical Center for a portion of a building that's located on Dunnery Street in Lafayette and is currently occupied by Our Lady of Lourdes. And the board may remember that on February 17, 2022, you approved the acquisition of the Lady of Lourdes property, and that transaction is expected to close next week on the 28th. So as part of that transaction, Lady of Lourdes is requesting continue its outpatient rehab facility for a period of no more than 2 years, so a new location can be identified. The lease will commence soon after the closing, and Lady of Lourdes will pay the university approximately $7,600 a month. This value was independently determined by the appraisal group of Louisiana that's located in Lafayette. Item I-10 is University of Louisiana at Lafayette, approval of 4 naming opportunities, and Dr. Savoy provided all the justification. Want to request to name the collaboration area at Louisiana Entrepreneurship and Economic Development at the Light Center, known as the SCP Health Collaboration Arena. The J. Arthur Roy House Outdoor Garden Area, honoring the life and legacy of Betty Angers Fleming. So they'll have a plaque out there, they'll say, in memory of Betty Angers Fleming. The President's Parking Lot at Cajun Field is requesting to name it Gulf Coast Bank President's Parking Lot. And finally, the Earl K. Long Gymnasium Upstairs Lounge, named be Cliff and Amy Gittery Family Lounge. Item I-11 and 12 are from University of Louisiana at Monroe, requesting approval to enter into a facilities lease agreement with ULM Facilities. One project, item I-11, is to construct a new short game practice area at the Wally Jones Golf Complex. This project will consist of new turf chipping greens, a turf putting green, some tee boxes, and it will include about 10,000 square feet of artificial turf and putting areas, and this will help to reduce their maintenance for mowing. And it's going to be funded totally by private donations of about $150,000. And the second item, I-12 from ULM, is to enter, again, a grounds lease agreement with ULM Facilities to replace the artificial turf on the football stadium at Malone Stadium. Total funding for this project that they at ULM-MFI anticipate is approximately $700,000, again, funded by private donations. Finally, I-13 is from University of New Orleans. Dr. Nicolo has sent in a revised request. We had previously approved the College of Science building as the Mary Grace Curry College of Science building. Dr. Nicolo has now requested that it be named the E-Rhett Curry College of Sciences building. E-Rhett was Mary Grace Curry's mother's maiden name. And at this time, Mr. Posada, these are all the consent items I have, and I wanted to let each of you know that some of the presence or staff are here, as well as legal staff, should the board have any particular questions.
Any questions? All right, all these agenda items have been reviewed by board, legal staff, and are recommended for approval. Of course, if anybody has any questions or wishes to discuss any of these items, please let me know. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? If no one requires any further clarification of the agenda items, may I have a motion and a second to approve items I-1 through I-13?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Clark. Have a second?
Second.
Ms. Herndon. All in, or do we have any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Do we have any other further business at this time? If not, that will conclude the business of the Facilities Planning Committee, and we can move to the Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Posada. At this time, Chair Romero will address the items on the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Chair Pierre. On this afternoon's Finance Committee agenda, we have 8 items total, 4 of which are consent items, 4 of which are discussion items. And with us today, we have Mr. Eddie Mesh and Ms. Ashley McIntyre. They will present the items for our consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. Item J1, Louisiana Tech University's request for approval to enter a 10-year lease agreement with Barnes & Noble Bookstores, LLC. Louisiana Tech University requests approval to enter a contract with Barnes & Noble to provide bookstore services on the university campus. The university issued a request for proposals and received proposals from 2 submitters. The university committee evaluated the proposals and selected Barnes & Noble, the university's current bookstore provider, as a successful proposal. The agreement has a term of 10 years beginning with August 1, 2023, and contains an option to renew for an additional 5 years with mutual agreement of the parties. The agreement will provide Barnes & Noble with approximately 30,000 square feet of space for bookstore operations. As financial consideration, Barnes & Noble will pay commissions at a minimum rate of 14.1% and a maximum rate of 16.1% of gross sales of general merchandise and 10% of gross sales for course materials. Barnes & Noble will provide up to $350,000 for renovations and improvements of the facilities, and Barnes & Noble will provide $150,000 one-time signing bonus to be used at the university's discretion. J2, University of Louisiana's request for approval to establish LAQSF endowed professorships, endowed first-generation scholarships, and graduate scholarships. The Louisiana Educational Quality Support Fund provides for grants to be provided upon receipt of private donations for an establishment of endowed professorships, first-generation scholarships, and graduate scholarships. Management boards are required to authorize the establishment of the endowments prior to submission to the Board of Supervisors for matching funds. The following campuses have submitted for matching funds for the following endowments: McNeese State University, Shirley Kidd Hunter Professorship in Music; Northwestern State University, J. Walter Porter Family Endowed Professorship in Business; Southeastern Louisiana University, Steve Koss First Generation Endowed Scholarship number 2; Thelma Ryan First Generation Endowed Scholarship; Joyce C. Jungans Endowed Professorship in Business number 4; and MHSF Endowed Cameron Barr Graduate Scholarship in Population Health Management. University of Louisiana at Lafayette, Cynthia Bio Hartgerink Endowed Professorship in Computing and Informatics. University of Louisiana at Monroe, Tex Kilpatrick Endowed Professorship in Kinesiology. And the University of New Orleans, Philip J. Gunn and Jean M. Turner Endowed First Generation Scholarship number 1 and number 2. Anil Raj Endowed Professorship in Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering. Joseph Lee and Nola McCulloch Endowed First Generation Scholarship. And a total of 15 Mary Grace Curry Endowed First Generation Scholarships in science, numbering 1 through 15.
Item J3 is the University of Louisiana System's request for approval of payments made by nonprofit organizations to employees of the system during fiscal year 22, in accordance with provisions of Louisiana Revised Statute 17, Section 3390F. In your materials is a schedule of payments made by nonprofit organizations to employees of the system for the fiscal year ended 22. Louisiana Revised Statute requires that any single payment of over $1,000 made by a nonprofit organization to or on behalf of an employee or officer of a public higher education institution or management board be approved in writing by the appropriate management board in accordance with written policies and procedures. In accordance with PPM FB 4-6, we are requesting that the board approve the schedule of payments made by nonprofit organizations to university employees during the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. Individual campuses submit quarterly reports of the payments, and these have been compiled into the schedule. Item J4 is the University of Louisiana System's financial status of alternatively financed projects for the 6 months ended December 31st, 2022. Alternatively financed projects are facility construction projects that are financed and constructed by campus-affiliated nonprofit corporations, like foundations and facility corporations. Universities lease their land to the nonprofits, and the nonprofits finance and construct the facilities and then lease the completed facilities back to the universities for their use. In many cases, the nonprofits will incur debt to finance these projects, and campus facility lease payments finance the bond payments. Semi-annually, campuses report the financial status of these projects to the system. Campuses report results of operations and debt coverage ratios of their projects. A debt coverage ratio of 1 would indicate that operations funded just enough to make debt payments with no excess funds. These projects are reported as either student housing projects or non-student housing projects. In total, campuses reported student housing revenues of approximately $49 million, expenditures of $14 million, annual debt obligations of $22 million, and a debt coverage ratio of 1.6. Campuses did not express any concern regarding their individual student housing projects. Non-housing projects would include student unions, parking garages, recreational facilities, athletic facilities, and similar projects. In total, campuses reported non-housing revenues of approximately $16 million, expenditures of $5 million, annual debt obligations of $7 million, and a debt coverage ratio of 1.6. Campuses did not express any concern regarding their individual non-student housing projects. This is a report only, and no action by the board is necessary.
And this completes the consent items, Mr. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. Nash, Ms. McIntosh, for presenting the items for our consideration today. We have been presented consent items J1 to J3. They've been reviewed by board staff and are recommended for approval. Of course, if any member has a question, feel free to let me know at this time. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Jimmy?
A question on J1 relative to the Barnes & Noble circumstance. Other institutions in our system that use Barnes & Noble?
Yes, sir.
And how do these financial considerations compare to theirs? Do we look at that? I mean, are we getting a good deal here, or are other institutions leaving anything on the table?
Yes, sir. No, I think this is really a renewal of a previous contract that Louisiana Tech has had, and it's a fair agreement for their university and their circumstances.
I don't doubt that. In terms of comparison to other institutions that are, I mean, other institutions that we have contracts with, are we getting comparables in terms of minimum rates and general merchandise and gross sales and so on? I mean, is that?
Yes, sir. Very, very similar.
If I could, Mr. Supervisor, they are comparable based on the volume of sales, right?
Okay.
So it's a sliding scale that is pretty uniform. There can be some differences in terms of investments in capital based on need, but that actually will change some of the other financial considerations. But it's pretty much, you could draw on the annual volume of sales directly to the incentives that come from it. It's pretty formulaic.
Okay. And I guess my questions isn't just Barnes & Noble, to be quite frank. It's other vendors that have contracts with multiple institutions. And are we getting the same deals in the same circumstances? And are we looking at that and making sure that that is in fact the case?
So one way to ensure that is to go through an RFP process, which they did, and they make the comparison of the two vendors that are making those proposals, and then they discuss it, and then they make a decision what's best for the university. And that's what happened in this case.
And there can be variance based on the institution. For instance, when Sodexo Magic came in to partner with Grambling State, there's no other institution that could have that type of relationship simply because of the iconic brand that Grambling brought to the table. So there's those kinds of variances. But in terms of the financials, there's a lot of consistency, and most of it is based on volume.
Second question?
Sure.
J2, I'm just curious, endowed professorships. Do we have endowed professorships that we've approved that have not had matching funds provided? Do we have are we in a waiting list circumstance, or are we getting them all?
Well, there's only so much money to go around to fund those. So they're prioritized by universities. Each university will get a guarantee, I believe, 2. And then it's competitive. And then funds become available as universities reprioritize. Those will eventually be funded.
Okay, so how many do we currently have that that we've approved that have not received matching funds?
I don't have that information today, but I can certainly get that from the Board of Regents if you'd like.
Oh, I just get concerned that we continue to approve and approve and approve these without question, and then I have no idea if they ever get dollars.
There's numerous funded over the years, and it's helped universities.
Oh, I'm all
immensely.
for them. Look, I'm 100% for them. I'd love to put pressure on the state finances to give us more dollars specifically for it. And if we have a huge waiting list or a lot of numbers, then I want to figure out a way to push that.
Right, we can get that information for you.
Yeah, I think a
Glad to do
status
that.
report at the April meeting would be appropriate for all the ones that have been approved, those that have been funded, and those still remaining to be funded.
That's correct.
That'd be-
That's all I have.
All right, any other questions from the board?
Well, just to follow up on Dr. Clark's, these recommendations go to Regents, correct?
That's correct.
And so it would be
Right.
Regents that actually has to approve the funding of it. So we may need to ask.
Well, they, correct me if I'm wrong, they approved the funding, but then they still sit and don't get funded. I mean, regions can still.
Very competitive process.
Yeah.
Approve.
Eventually, hopefully, they will be approved over time. And the institutions prioritize which ones they want first, and so those get funded first.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? If no one requires any further clarification on the consent items, may I have a motion and second to approve J1 to J3? Moved by Mr. Robinson.
Second, Davidson.
Second by Mr. Davidson. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Proceeding, Ms. McIntyre and Mr. Mesh will provide a brief overview on the discussion items we have.
Item J5, Louisiana Tech University's request for approval for a student vote on a new parking enhancement fee. Louisiana Tech University Student Government Association proposes a referendum for a student vote to create a parking enhancement fee. The proposed fee would be assessed at $20 per full-time student per quarter, and part-time students would be assessed at a prorated amount. A student election is anticipated to be held in spring 2023. And the fee would be assessed for all quarters and would generate approximately $480,000 annually. The fee would provide for construction improvement of campus parking facilities and for an anticipated debt payments associated with the construction. If approved by students, the fee would be assessed beginning with the fall 2023 quarter. To tell you more, Dr. Geis, Dr. Dickie Crawford, Vice President for Student Advancement, and Elizabeth McKinney, Student Body President, are here to talk more about the referendum and to answer your questions.
Thank you, Eddie. I appreciate all your help helping us get to this point, and thank the board for allowing us to present this proposal to you for your consideration. As all of you are aware, on every college campus, parking is a point of conversation, not just among students, but faculty and staff as well. So that's nothing new for any of you, I'm sure, and Louisiana Tech is no exception to that. In September of this past fall, our Louisiana Tech Office of Institutional Effectiveness sent out a survey to all of our Louisiana Tech students. And there was one question on that survey, and it stated, how could your student experience be improved at Louisiana Tech? And so we got a very good response back from the student body responding to that survey, that question, and the overwhelming response by the students was in regard to the student perceived need for more parking. And so as a result of that survey, Dr. Geis asked me to get with Elizabeth McKinney, our SGA president, and our student leadership to, number one, let them know that we heard their voice, that we did hear what they had to say, and we wanted them to know that, and then continue the conversation about what would be a reasonable solution to the perceived parking concerns. So we started meeting. In those meetings, I communicated to the student leadership that over the last decade, Louisiana Tech has spent approximately $11 million on parking and parking improvements without passing any of that cost along to the students. And I've communicated that I didn't know if we financially could continue that trend. The student leadership expressed that they would be willing, and they believe that the student body would be willing to share in the cost of future parking improvements, and that led then to the discussion of a fee. Also, during these conversations with the student leadership, we talked about many different issues related to parking, one of those being just making sure that we continue to provide a safe campus community, and parking is obviously a part of that. And that is in line with, I know, the conversations around the state for all campuses, talking about the need to continue to provide safety, safe environment for our students, including safe, well-lit parking facilities that are in close proximity to our campus. And we've been able to do that over these last several years, and with this project, if we're able to do it, we would want to continue that. If this board approves, as Eddie mentioned, this would go to a student vote in April. The Student Government Association would work with the administration during that time to host a series of town hall type meetings that would be us to be able to present to the student body and get their feedback and their questions, as well as social media communication to our students. And as Eddie mentioned, that if this is passed by our students, then it would go into effect the fall of 2023. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Elizabeth McKinney, our SGA president.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank y'all again for joining us today. But just to kind of go over a little bit of the student perspective that we've seen throughout this whole thing, as Dr. Crawford mentioned, we had our survey back in September, and the overwhelming response that we received was that parking was seen as a perceived issue around campus. So as we kind of started to have those conversations with our student leadership, I gathered a group of students that we tried our best to represent every single area of campus, from our underserved students, our international students, students from the Black Student Union. We tried to reach every area of campus as possible so we could get a broad range of the general opinion of our student body. And the overwhelming majority of that group actually unanimously decided that they would be willing to contribute to a student fee for parking facilities. And we began different discussions on what that fee could look like. We began talking about what that would entail, whether it would be a parking deck, whether it be potential parcels of land that we look into, various things like that. And students ultimately decided that $20 would be the maximum number that they would be willing to pay, which we were, more than grateful to hear any number whatsoever for this kind of thing. And we decided that that is something that we'd be very happy to work with. So conversations continued to happen, and it kind of got us down to that point of $20. Then, of course, we would come to you guys, present this here, and we tried our hardest not to, of course, spread news of this all over Louisiana Tech, because we wanted to make sure to come to y'all first and see if we can get this approved before spreading it throughout campus. If it does pass today, then we have a plan of communication, which I know we've shared with the board, but I just kind of wanted to go into depth with that and explain to you guys how SGA plans on sharing this with the campus community and getting word out about it, getting information out to the students, and making sure that everyone is as informed as possible on this potential fee. So, for starters, we would begin sharing on Instagram and Facebook all of our different graphics based around the fee, what the fee entails, how much the fee would be, how it would be prorated to students. Full-time students per quarter would be paying $20. Students who are non-traditional students, of course, that number kind of varies for them. We would also begin having town hall meetings every once in a while. We originally plan on doing 2 weeks prior to the election in April, and one week prior to the election in April, so that way students can come and ask questions. They will have the opportunity to voice their concerns, just kind of have their voice spoken out. And if they are unable to attend either of those meetings, we will also have a link on the student government website that will allow students to submit questions there that then our public relations team will ask us in those town hall meetings. We'll be getting help from Dr. Crawford, Ms. Stacy Gilbert, Mr. Sam Speed, and a few other administrators to help out with those town halls, as well as my executive team. They'll be in attendance at those events as well. We will also be attending all kinds of organization events, from BSU to Union Board, which is one of our events organizations on campus, Greek life meetings, just making sure that we're reaching as much of the student body as we possibly can so they can hear about, the benefits of this fee, what it entails, and how it will affect each individual student. And lastly, we would be doing tabling each week, the SGA executive members as well as SGA members. And we would essentially be setting up tables in high traffic areas around campus, allowing students to come up and talk to us about what their concerns are, what questions they have, and we would pretty much just be answering all of that for them and breaking down this fee so they can see how it would affect them and benefit them.
We do appreciate your consideration of this proposal. I might add that about 2 decades ago, President Renault at that time approached me about leading the strategic plan development for the campus and also the master plan development, and we hired a firm out of Boston to come in and really help us with our master planning of our campus and encouraging us to create safe places, density of our buildings, and try to move the parking over time around the perimeter, the edges of our campus where it's real accessible. And this plan that we have in place for new parking facilities would really address that. And we don't have a lot of room on our campus to expand facilities, so we have to be very smart in how we use our space. That's part of the consideration here.
Thank you all. I certainly appreciate the effort you're making to generate participation and having a plan to execute on causing your students to participate in the election process. I think it's very, very important. I can go back to parking as a challenge when I was a student, and I guess the challenge had a positive. I learned how to parallel park really well. So hopefully you all solve that and maybe let everybody learn on their own. Agenda item J5 has been reviewed by our staff and is recommended for approval. At this time, we have any questions from the board. Dr. Clark.
Yeah, first of all, I really appreciate the presentation from both of you. Well done. Have no objections to this particular fee. I have questions related to fees, student fees in general, and just affordability in general. I mean, a $20 fee sounds fine. What is Louisiana Tech's total student fee every quarter? How much do you charge students in total student fees?
I will defer to our Vice President, Ms. Lisa Cole, on that.
Good afternoon. Our tuition and fees for a full-time undergraduate student are $3,335, I think, per quarter, approximately $10,000 per year.
So $3,000 in student fees, $3,000?
That's tuition.
So that's tuition. And what is the
Tuition
fee?
and
What is the
fees.
student fee component of that?
$1,851 is the tuition component, and so the difference,
So about $1,500
about
roughly?
$1,500
in
fees,
student
yes.
fees. And I guess my question comes in, that we hear these presentations and they're well done. And again, I'm totally for this. I have no problem. Okay, I think it's fine. I just get worried that at some point in time, the way that we are structured in the state, and it's not just our board, but it's the state, in terms of tuition and fees become the way to continue to hit the consumer up. And I think that there's a break point. I think there's an affordability break point that we've got to be recognizing. And I'm not sure, again, how best to, elevate this discussion and do it in a way that doesn't impact individual student fee projects that are needed and necessary. I just wanted to suggest that at some point in time we do a significant review and or ask, institutions, do you review existing fees to say, we need to get rid of these because they're no longer germane and so on. And maybe that's the case, and I commend you for it.
And that's been part of our conversation, Mr. Clark, as far as looking at the existing fees and seeing what fees that could roll off. Our SJ president brought that up in the first conversation we had, so it's being looked at.
It's being looked at. Did we identify any, or are we planning to?
Well, that's the process we're in right now.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Especially
Well,
those that are not.
I appreciate that it's on the books to be done.
Yeah, especially those that aren't assigned to any long-term debt, obligations. If there's some opportunities there, we definitely want to do that.
And I'm appreciative of the enthusiastic nodding of the student body president who will make sure that these are reviewed. Good.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask one question. Lisa, do you have a general fee?
Yes.
And this is one of the things that happened. So we talk about fees as if fees are all student-generated. In Louisiana, we made the decision to create general fees that are tuition. There is no distinction between a general fee and tuition other than the nomenclature. And so how much of that $1,500 thereabouts is the general fee?
I do not have that with me.
I'm sorry, I'll put you on the spot.
But a high percentage of it is.
Yeah.
The amount that I gave as a tuition is that TOPS amount
That's
that's
right.
covered by TOPS. And so we do have quite a few fees, as Dr. Henderson said, that are a general fee or fees, academic enhancement, academic excellence, that are really they're more similar to tuition than they would be to the fee component.
And for board members, for you to understand what happened starting in about 2008, 2009, that fiscal year, we started a state disinvestment in higher education, and we increased fees dollar for dollar for the state cuts that was associated with the GRAD Act. The GRAD Act was designed to give autonomy and resources to institutions to operate. Instead, it became a mechanism by which fees could be increased and offset decreases in state funding. And if you watch it, it's almost a dollar for dollar thing. It didn't have a dollar for dollar impact on institutions because of things like discount rates and scholarships and these kind of things. So it was really a net loss for institutions. While some of that would have been tuition increases, that would, at that time, tuition and TOPS were coupled. So if you had an increase in tuition, the increase in the TOPS payment would go up by a requisite amount. When TOPS, because of that linkage, institutions were required to do general fee increases instead of tuition increases. Now, since that time, TOPS and tuition have been decoupled, so an increase in tuition no longer has an impact on TOPS. But that was the perfect storm that led to this dramatic increase in fees, this dramatic cost burden shared by students. When we started this approach as a state policy, students paid on average about 30% of the cost of an education. Today, students pay in excess of 70% of the cost of their education. And I think you're exactly right, Dr. Clark. We've seen an impact on students. We've seen an impact on particular subpopulations of students, demographics, socioeconomic background. It's something that we're going to spend generations trying to correct. And I appreciate you bringing up the issue. But to our student leadership, thank you for always just being the exemplary student body president. You make us so proud to do this work. So appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
As a follow-up, how does that compare to neighboring states?
Yes, sir.
The percentage that is covered by students?
There's a number of ways to look at that. We are one of the states that is the lowest funded in total resources per student. And then when you look at the state investment per student, we usually battle with Florida between 15th and 16th lowest state funded per student of the 16 southern region states. There's some other differences hidden in that. For instance, we spend about 26% of our payroll retiring unfunded accrued liabilities. This is getting deep in the weeds of finance, but that's a $124 million bill that we pay every year to retire pension debt that accrued in the 80s and 90s. Florida doesn't make that expenditure. So even when you compare the resource base, you also have to look at the expenditure base. That puts us at a severe disadvantage. Another way to look at it is it's a look at per capita investments in state support of higher education. So even inclusive of TOPS, state of Louisiana spends about $310 per capita in state support of higher education. Our friends in Alabama spend about $425 per capita. In Georgia, it's $480 per capita. In Texas, it's a little less than us, but if you think about the economies of scale in Texas, they have more citizens in metropolitan Houston than we do in the state of Louisiana. Right? They also don't spend money on their UAL. And so, you know, as a matter of prioritization, we've seen some amazing increases in investments in our work over these last 8 years. And we should all be grateful for that. We continue to work with our legislative body, to continue to work with the Division of Administration, certainly with the governor's office to increase those investments. And as a result of those investments, we've seen negligible, if any, increases in general fees or tuition for the last 6 years. That's a good start. We've got miles to go before we sleep. Yes, sir.
Thank you all. Any other questions?
I do have one additional question, please. So I noticed that the request was for approval for a student body vote. I was just curious, have you had any feedback from students who either don't own a car or do not prefer to drive on campus in terms of the assessment fee?
So we actually did include some of our students in the student leadership that did not own vehicles because we wanted to make sure, once again, we were reaching all areas of the student body. And even those students, to my surprise as well, were interested in this fee and thought that it actually could be very beneficial because of the safety aspect of it all. It would, of course, add more lighting around campus. It would bring a few more safety features. And so also these students kind of weren't looking at it from their perspective, but they were seeing it from, this may not help me because I might graduate by the time this is officially done in fall of 2024, of course, but, they were looking at the future of the student body as a whole, which anytime we do fees like this that are a 30-year debt, that's what our students are looking at, is not what's going to affect them, but affect the students in the future, so.
I am constantly amazed and impressed by our student leadership, and they did bring up the conversation about not just for them, but from a recruiting standpoint for us for the future, providing a campus that's going to recruit and retain students for the future. So they were looking at it not just for them, because they may be here for just another year or two, but looking at it for the future.
And Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, Louisiana Tech has a shuttle service on campus, is that right, for their students?
This is new, yes, we do. We just started that this fall. As a result, predominantly of the construction that we have going on the east side of our campus around the College of Engineering and College of Business. A lot of construction, which is a good thing, and it will be really great once it's done, but it's been a little inconvenient and has been inconvenient for parking, especially for commuter students. And so what we did, we have this really big new parking lot that was where our old softball and soccer field used to be prior to the tornado that came through. And so, but it is maybe considered a little bit of a walking distance for students going to the College of Engineering and College of Business. And so we provided that shuttle service for commuter students who are majoring in those areas and having classes in those areas to be able to ride the shuttle to the east side of the campus. Any student could use it, but it was predominantly designed for those students to be able to take advantage of. So we started that this year.
Sure, and I know a lot of students, particularly in Louisiana Tech's SGA, that use that shuttle service. Excuse me. There's a lot of senators that will, particularly commuters, that will park downtown and because of no ample parking around campus, and be able to take that shuttle into campus. So I want to commend you for, Elizabeth, your leadership, Dr. Crawford, you as well. Student fees are something that is not, it's not an easy start from the beginning, from the discussions all the way forward through the vote. That's just the tip of the iceberg, right? So I want to commend both of you for the work, the exemplary work you're displaying here, and hope to see this pass soon.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
The first. So we are going to, the plan would be to utilize our 501c3 corporation, Innovative Student Facilities Incorporated, working with our investment banking team, Toby Cortez, Lawrence Sissung, to get their guidance on the financial side, as well as Jones Walker to get their help on the legal side of it, working with Matt Kern there. So that's the plan. If this is voted on by the students in favor of, we would look at borrowing the money to then build what we need to build out. So hopefully the plan would be to have parking available, ready to go fall of 2024.
Other questions? Any questions from the public?
I got one final question. Sure. Mr. Romero, apologies. Is there an expiration date on this, Dr. Crawford?
Well, if we do borrow the money, as we mentioned, it would be probably a 30-year note, so that would be over 30 years we would have that fee.
Okay, thank you.
So obviously this is a fee per student. You do have other parking revenue. What kind of revenue would that parking facility generate?
This fee would generate approximately $480,000 per year based on our current enrollment.
So do you have any other direct revenue that would be derived from that parking facility?
Well, it could. That has been thought about. If we did a parking deck or garage, that could be elevated parking revenue for those spots there that are covered spots, maybe, but we haven't, decided on that yet. Our faculty, staff, and students currently pay $100 a year for a parking decal. That goes to operate our police station, as well as fix potholes around other campus parking lots, as well as service some of the debt that we incurred. I mentioned earlier about the $11 million that we incurred over the last decade for parking. It does service some of that debt as well.
So given that you provide prime parking for students and faculty and others, do you have any general idea of what perimeter parking that's offered by private property owners might be for your students, just from an awareness standpoint?
Well, we've identified some, as Dr. Geis mentioned, we're running out of space around the campus to purchase. We've done a lot of that over the last 20, 25 years, running out of that available space for surface level parking. We have identified some in close proximity to the campus that possibly we can negotiate with property owners to purchase if they're willing to sell at a reasonable rate. So that's what we're
would you
looking at.
have an idea of what maybe a current parking fee might be that a private property owner would offer a student to park on their property?
I do know we have not entered into those conversations. Believe it or not, in this community, many of our local folks have allowed them to park there for free. We have a local church that allows them to park there for free during Monday through Friday. So,
Any other questions? Questions from the public? Hearing none, and needing no further clarification for item J5, if I could have a motion and a second for approval.
So moved.
I'll second that statement.
Moved by Ms. Donahoe, second by Mr. Stevens. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Geis. Thank all of you.
Item J6, McNeese State University's request for approval to allow a student referendum for a self-assessed McNeese Recreational Complex fee increase. McNeese State University Student Government Association passed a resolution proposing a referendum for a student vote for a McNeese Recreation Complex fee increase. If approved by students, the fee would increase the fee for part-time and full-time students from $30 to $45 for summer, fall, and spring semesters. The student vote would be held April 3rd through April 5th, 2023. With the increase, the recreational complex fee would generate approximately $495,000, $165,000 for the increase, and the funds would be used to make necessary repairs and provide improved resources to McNeese students. To tell you more, Dr. Burkell, Dr. Kedrick Nicholas, Dean of Students, Samuel Gill, Student Body President, and Lacey Winsel, Director of Recreation and Wellness Programs, are here to talk more about the referendum and to answer your questions.
Good afternoon, members of the board. On behalf of our university, we appreciate your time and this opportunity to make this presentation before you. At McNeese State University, we pride ourselves on making sure that our student fee assessments are student-led and student-driven. We have a very thorough process on an annual basis where student fees are reviewed through our student fee oversight process. During that meeting, fees are reviewed to consider their expenditure efficiencies and the need for any fee increases, decreases, or elimination of fees. Our SGA conducted its internal legislative process to propose fee increases to 2 dated and strained fees. The legislation in SGA passed unanimously to bring this proposal before you today. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our SGA president, Sam Gill, to discuss the need.
Members of the board, I thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to speak before you all today. My name is Samuel Gill, and I'm the SGA president of McNeese State University. I come before you today to ask that this board allow 2 student fee referendums to move to campus-wide vote. The first being an increase in the recreational complex fee, and the second being an increase in the rodeo fee, which we'll get to after this. Before coming to McNeese, I saw the recreation complex as a dark building that honestly needed work. Through strategic leadership on SGA, we have been able to bring new life into the most widely utilized campus resource, but due to budget constraints, we are limited to how or when we can use this building. Students enjoy a wide range of activities in this building, but the hours were cut recently to keep the building properly staffed and safe. With this fee increase, it would allow us to accommodate for the evolving interest in other intramural sporting activities, including pickleball and ultimate frisbee. Our teams could travel and not rely on SGA or fundraisers to get them to their destination. We can increase student employment and the hours that they can achieve. Our current fee stands at $30, while the next lowest in comparison collects $63 total for their recreational complex and intramural sports. Even with our increase of $15, we are still $18 lower than a sister institution. Our recreational complex fee is currently over 2 decades old, and with rising expenses, sustaining operations at an adequate level becomes difficult. Thank you.
If there are any questions, concerns?
So before us, we have an opportunity to consider this fee increase. If we have any questions from the board, student members.
Excuse me,
as well
just to be
as-
clear, Mr. Romero, this is a proposal for a campus-wide vote
Right.
for the students. Yes, sir.
My question is whether or not y'all consider the effect of having two ballots at the same time. So two fees being assessed, each is going to have constituency and also potential opposition. So y'all thought through whether or not it's best to run these separately or together.
We would like to run them together because with a very, how do I put this? We have a student leadership election coming up very soon, and we thought it was best to put both fees on the ballot because with this election coming up, it's going to generate a lot of chatter about it, and we think we'll get some good voter turnout as well. So we just decided to put them both on.
Sam, just for clarification, this is going to be two separate referendums, right, the students are voting on?
Correct, yes. Two separately listed on the ballot.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, is it improper for us to, can we hear both items collectively that we're going to hear? Can we, versus having to vote on one and then listen to another one? Because I have some questions about the second one, and that may impact what I decide to do on the first one.
We have no objection from the committee. Could we take these items together and vote? No objections. So we'll do that, Mr. Perkins.
As a vote or as just
No, it's a vote,
discussion?
I would say it's a
information.
Just, I'd like to vote on them separately myself.
Yeah, it will be a separate, I'm asking for a separate
Okay,
vote,
so
but what the
we'll
information
proceed-
from
we'll
the,
proceed with
Yeah.
having a discussion around both and voting on them individually.
So would y'all like for me to go ahead and speak about the rodeo fee as well?
Samuel, if you would.
Okay. For our rodeo team, expenses for everything from animal feed to tractor parts have increased significantly. A standard bag of feed in 2013 costed $11.90, and it now costs $16.75. 2 cows can eat 1 sack of feed a day. As the fee stands today, they are barely surviving. Our team is a national award-winning and recognized program. In the past 10 years, the team has produced more than 10 individual national champions, as well as 2 national champion teams and 3 reserve national champion teams. They bring the university vast media coverage and are a great recruiting tool for our university, as they can travel to where our recruiters cannot. They are also the only rodeo team in the state of Louisiana. They are an active group on campus whose members model the qualities of our university. This fee will allow more of its members to travel and be provided practice livestock.
I have a question. What is the amount of the fee that you
The
asked
fee
for?
currently, as it stands, in the fall and the spring is $4.50, with the summer being $4, and they will be all doubled to $9 for the fall and spring and $8 for the summer. 9 across the board, excuse me, I've been corrected.
Is that for every student?
Yes, sir. Flat.
These fees have been vetted with the student body?
Yes, sir. They came before us via a senator, and they were voted on unanimously by our Senate.
And then they'll be going to the student body pending the decision of the board.
Oh, so the student senate voted on the fees, and they gave you all authority to come and present this to us?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
If approved by us, it would then go back to the student body for the student body to. So none of the some of the student body, but not all of the student body is aware of these fees at this point.
Correct. We will, like I mentioned before, we have a very contended student election, and we as an SGA are also going to make sure that there are emails, social media, and our student newspaper, and make sure that the campus is fully aware of these fees whenever it comes time for to vote on the ballot, which is April 3rd through 5th.
Now, in most voting situations, you've got a majority rule, or, is this a majority rule, or is this going to be a high percentage of the student body has to vote yes on this for this to be accepted?
It is a simple majority vote.
Simple majority vote?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so 51%, and that's fine.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Robinson, for clarity on this matter as well, most of the institutions, SGAs typically take this same practice. It will be passed in the Senate, the SGA Senate, brought here to the board, and then it's a full-fledged campaign to move forward at the student level, at the students, for them to see this fee. So basically, Sam and his team will be campaigning, much like Elizabeth herself at Louisiana Tech, to campaign it to the students for them to vote on in April.
I have another question. The group that you spoke with, or you kind of vetted this for the overall complex fee, are members of that same group being vetted for the rodeo team fee? Is it the same population that you have kind of vetted these fees through?
Yes. Yeah. It was presented before our Senate, and that represents the entirety of our campus and all of their constituents as well.
So they heard both of these fees at the same time?
Yes. Yes, it was presented at our weekly SGA general body meeting.
And each student will have the opportunity to vote individually? In other words, it's not
Yes, ma'am.
just a general fee increase?
Yes, ma'am. It will be listed separately on the ballot, and it will have an explanation to the fees as well.
And I want to speak to that because I believe, Mrs. Stevens, that was your question. You were asking why we didn't put the two fees together as one vote. Was that the question you were asking? Because I feel like that's what you were asking.
No.
Okay, I'm
Same
sorry.
ballot. Running as two separate votes is probably appropriate.
Correct,
But
correct.
at the same time, on the same cycle, it might be a challenge. for
I
that,
got it, okay.
Because obviously you'll have support for one but not the other potentially. And that, you can kind of see that amongst the board members, right? You have a little consternation with the second one, and it's obvious. What's the primary source of funding for the rodeo team? How much does the university contribute? Are there donations, private support as well?
From what I understand from the rodeo, they have their student fee, which I believe amounts to about $54,000 a year, which is used solely for operation cost. They do not have a facility, and rodeo in general is an expensive sport, and so a lot of it is covered by the families that are participating because rodeo is a family initiative. And they also do fundraisers throughout the year, primarily for scholarships to get their team to pay for their education and to get more people onto the team as well. And one of the things they do is like a large boxing match, and that raises almost $40,000 a year. And then for certain things, they'll reach out for donor support as well.
And we have two individuals that work firsthand with these fees. We have Ms. Lacey Winsel, who's our Director of Recreation and Wellness Programs. She oversees the rec complex. And Mr. Justin Browning, our coach for the rodeo program. So Justin, I don't know if you want to speak more to.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks for allowing me to speak. You asked what the university puts into the rodeo program versus what the rodeo team puts into it. All of our operating budget comes from this fee. So right now, we have 29 students on the rodeo team working off of a $50,000 budget. I've been here about 15 years. My goal here was to separate the funds. So when we got here, when I came to McNeese, we had a very low budget for scholarships to bring kids in, to students into the state and into the program. And so I made it a goal to start raising scholarship money. And so I kept those budgets separated. So the boxing match that Sam was talking about, we do a rodeo in the fall. We bring in about $40,000 for that too. We actually, in the spring and the fall, we started 5 years ago, we do a school day rodeo. We bring in kids from the inner city and do a rodeo for them, kids that have never had an opportunity to see the sport of rodeo. And we bring them in for a field trip and sorry about that. And we allow them to experience a rodeo. And as we know, in the state of Louisiana, as he said, we're the only rodeo team in the state. A really cool thing too with this is that last year's team, our men's reserve national team, 2 national champions, a reserve national champion, every one of those students was from Louisiana. So right now we have 99% of the students, I would say, are from Louisiana. To get kids recruited out of Louisiana, we have to have the funds to provide practice, and that's what this operating budget does. Is the assessment fee? It allows us to help them with their travel expenses. It allows us to create opportunities for them to practice. We don't have our own facility. The parish allows us to use their facility at a really low rate to rent, but we have to be able to produce practice to recruit. So next year, we're looking at having about 45 students on the team because of our success, because of my coaching and my coaching staff. And so that's why we're bringing kids in for the first time ever from the country of Mexico. We're bringing kids in from South Dakota, North Dakota, just places that we've never even thought about getting athletes from. And we have to be able to provide them with practice opportunities to get better, because as an education, as an entity, that's what we're about, is development. No matter if we're sports or if we're in the classroom, we're about developing great young athletes. And if we don't pass this, I can honestly tell you that we'll probably go down to about 20 on the team because we can't
Mr. Chairman,
operate.
if I could ask a question. How long has the rodeo program been at McNeese?
Since 1949, I believe.
1949.
I believe we're called the Cowboys because of the rodeo team. I believe McNeese exists because of livestock and agriculture.
Curious, have you seen an increase in interest in rodeo when you have shows like Yellowstone and others that are making cowboying cool again, if you will? Yeah, I'm ready to go back.
You come, I'll teach you.
Talking about that extra interest, I'm going to use one of his rodeo members as an example. A guy by the name of Drew Bourdlaw. Drew Bourdlaw was a year above me at Sacred Heart in Ville Platte, and I would have never pegged Drew as someone who was going to go ride a horse and saddle bronc and all kinds of things. And he's on the team, and he's pretty successful. And I considered him a city boy at one point. So I think, there's a growing interest in it as well, and especially because that, what he just stated, they're looking to add almost 16 people to the team. That's pretty awesome.
My last question is that the national championships, that's typically in Wyoming, is that right?
Yes, it's in Wyoming, Casper, Wyoming.
And at one of the most vaunted historic rodeo facilities that exist anywhere on the planet, if I'm not mistaken. And that's rodeo country, is it not?
Yeah, Wyoming definitely is. The state, it supports, it actually sponsors everybody. The state itself does, so it's
If
pretty
you got
big.
if you got this fee approved, would you guarantee that you would beat Tarleton?
Well, see, the funny thing is, I was a coach at Tarleton before I came here. And individually, we beat Tarleton every day. I mean, I pride ourselves on our goat tires and our saddle bronc riders, and that's what we make. And we've had challenges against Tarleton. We've actually won, in the last 5 years, we've won 3 goat tie national championships, and then last year we won our first saddle bronc ride national championship to a kid that's from Louisiana, and they're not known for saddle bronc riding, and so we brought them into it. But also going back to what he said about Drew, and I know that you guys are, and I say you guys because I'm from Kansas originally, but like how does the rodeo team affect the whole student population as a whole? And anybody that goes to McNeese, no matter if they're a full-time student, a part-time student, teachers for that matter, it doesn't matter. Any of them can be part of the culture that we created. Drew wanted to learn how to ride broncs, so we taught him, and he's doing great now. He's doing great, so he's found his purpose there. He's actually, he had went to McNeese before the hurricane. He had quit going to McNeese after the hurricane, started at Sewella, befriended a couple guys on the team, contacted me. I said, well, if you'll come back to McNeese, I'll teach you, and he came back to McNeese. So we got another student right there. We have probably 10 students that aren't on scholarship or anything that are coming to make themselves better, as people. And all the fundraisers that we do, every student on campus, no matter if they're full-time, part-time, whatever, teacher, everyone comes to our events for free. So our rodeo tickets are $10 in the fall. They come. Our boxing tickets are $20. They can come for free, general admission. So if they take advantage of it, they're really not paying anything but for a good time. So.
I have another question. What is the overall math? You do the $9 times whatever your population, how much is that generate? 113 per, and that's for, what's the term, and how long, how many years? This is just going forward?
Yes, sir, that's annual.
Okay. And trying to become educated about this while we're doing it. Is this male and, is it women and men, or
Yes,
what's
sir.
the combination there?
Yes, sir, it's women and men. Right now, we have 12 men on the team and 17 women. So we have quite a few more ladies on the team. They're more focused, I would say. So.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, quick question.
Yeah, first let me preface my both remarks and questions by the fact that I'm a huge supporter of recreation and intramural sports and totally in favor and supportive of the rodeo program at Nice. For all the reasons you've said, I endorse the visibility and the support and the good feeling. I keep having in my mind, though, questions related to our entire process of student fees and how we do. We had a unique circumstance today to hear from Louisiana Tech, and you did a student survey, I think, that precipitated this, and then came to the Senate and so on. Here it was just a Senate done. I'm just saying there are differences in the way it does. There were some questions that were asked related to, is it a majority vote, is it not, is it a majority of students? And it causes questions in my mind. Should we set a threshold somehow of being able to say that a certain percentage of students actually vote and participate in and ultimately decide? This has nothing directly to do with your proposals, but in general, I think that we need to start asking some of those questions at some point in time, because I don't think in the 5 years I've been on the board we've ever turned down a student fee opportunity to vote on it. So it's not a matter of not wanting to support students, but I think we need to be thoughtful about the process. Specifically to your circumstances, I'm curious, a couple of things. One, I think you started out by saying that you have a review, a student fee review. I'm all about it. How many have you eliminated in the last, say, 5 years?
None have been eliminated, but several have been reallocated. So where the fee was dormant as far as use of the funds or technology changes. So like, for instance, our student newspaper, our student yearbook that operated differently with more student staff and the need for more office space, those fees were reduced in the last couple of years, and the money was reallocated to areas that needed more funding.
So the total cost of students remained the same, but there was a different set of well, I appreciate that, but again, I continue to have this concern about total amounts that students end up having to spend, and I was hoping you might tell me you would lop some off, but that's okay. The question specifically, there's travel money involved in the recreation complex fee? I didn't understand. Is that part of club sports? or?
So the travel that we look at is when we go to conferences, or specifically when our teams go the whole semester playing any of our intramural sports. There's an opportunity for us to take different groups that have won throughout the semester to the state level. And some universities require their students to pay their own way, hotels, gas, everything like that. So what we try to do is give them the opportunity to where we would at least cover their fees to be able to get into La Cursa, and then the hotel stay while we're there. Because we feel like if we've given them the opportunity to represent the university all semester, the least that we could do is reward them for winning and being able to go to the next level.
Thank you for the
We've had
clarification.
a couple of teams in the last couple of years that won state and were eligible for the national tournament as well, and we were limited in what we could do for them to get to nationals. We even had a team this past year that completely paid their own way outside of registration, I believe, to go to the national tournament, but we just couldn't cover it with the funds.
And these are intramural sports teams?
Correct, this is intramural sports.
Which are different than from club sport teams, and I'm assuming rodeo is considered a club sport, is that correct? I mean,
Yes, sir.
right. And is there, I mean, are other club sports receiving student fee allocations, or is this a separate, totally different?
We currently don't have any other club sports. There have been several that have explored it. For instance, we have an equestrian team that's been around for about 5 or 6 years, and they're trying to work their way towards it. Just like rodeo received that assessment, I don't know when the assessment started, but any club sport team has the ability to pursue a student fee following the process. And if I can add a little bit more context to the Senate process, the Senate process is not a proposal vote, and then now we move on to this stage. It's brought to the floor by a senator, and then the senators who represent every constituency on campus, they have the duty to go back to their constituents and share that resolution and get feedback from those individuals. When they come back to the SGA meeting, their vote represents all of those students who they've spoken with. So while we didn't do a survey to the entire campus, the survey is done kind of indirectly through the students who serve as senators representing every sector of campus.
Okay, I mean, I get that. I'm a little skeptical that all the students end up hearing or have a chance to weigh in. I mean, I have a congressman who represents me, but I'm not sure whether.
Which one is that?
I'm just saying. No, I appreciate what you're saying. And the only other thing I want to just elevate, and maybe for future discussion, is just, there are athletic fees, right? That is separate from the club sport. So we're used to approving student-assessed fees for NCAA athletics on most campuses. I'm just not as aware of necessarily the club sports, and if that is something to be considered that differentiates or whatever. I would say that certainly the rodeo program at McNeese has national claim and stature that certainly many don't even differentiate between it being.
Well, rodeo is not an NCAA sanctioned sport.
Right.
So it has.
Exactly, yeah. No, I totally get it. So anyway, thank you all.
Ms. Dust. It can still be funded by the university. Yes. By choice.
Yes.
And $113,000 is a long way to the rodeo program, but in the budget that he's had, that's really not that hard, not much. I guess that's a concern that I have. I want you guys to be successful. If you go before the students, I want it to pass. And I just think you're gonna have more people touched by, every student's gonna be touched by the rec facility if they choose to. 29 students participate in rodeo. Some students come to attend for the enjoyment of watching the activity. I don't want to see you not be successful if you get 20 students, and that is my concern.
And we definitely understand that. And to give some recent history, this will be the second time in the last 5 years, 5 or 6 years, that there was a proposal for rodeo. And unfortunately, 5 or 6 years ago, it did not pass with the student body. So as Sam mentioned, you know, this SGA election, we do expect some very prominent students to be a part of this SGA election, which means a lot of students will be engaged in the process. It is my hope that the students who are running for office will have a passion for these fee increases, and as they campaign for people to vote for them, that they will also campaign for people to vote for these two very important fees, and we hope that that will be the leverage we need to get over the top with these two fees.
quick points.
If you could maybe add a little bit, shed a little light on the conversation around the process.
Sure.
And obviously, questions, but.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I have no doubt that Sam, you and your team will campaign for this very well, be very open and transparent with the students. I have a feeling that you guys are going to exceed expectations there. Coach, question for you. Since your time at McNeese, and maybe even before, I know that the rodeo team has been at McNeese for quite some time now. The original $4.50 that was currently being allocated to the rodeo team, do you know when that was passed?
I'm not sure about the $4. We did get an increase in 2009. I've been here since 2007. In 2009, we got an increase of 50 cents in conjunction with another fee. We were in kind of, it was all clumped together. I believe the $4 was passed in I would say the 2000, early 2000s, maybe 1999, somewhere around there. I'm guessing, just thinking about the coach that did implement the passings of the fee.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. So definitely things have increased in pricing, of course, the last 20 years, and especially now the last few years. You know, the fee from $4.50 to $9 will certainly help the team and also help increase performance for them and for ultimately benefiting the students as well for a better show and giving more opportunities there. I will say that there has been, surprised to see that there's been more conversation about the rodeo team fee than there has been about the rec facility fee. But it's really, really good conversation that we're having there. So.
Thank you.
I have another question. I want to make sure I understand the process again. You were explaining. So for a fee to come up at the student level, someone brings it up. So the students don't get like a list of, hey, here are 8 things that can possibly be a fee increase. Which one do you want to do? Or is it just a person comes and say, we want to do an increase in this?
So with these 2 fees in mind, the conversation starts at that fee oversight meeting. All right, if it was a brand new fee, then obviously it's not being discussed at fee oversight because it's not a fee that exists that needs to be reviewed annually. So for these 2 fees, fee oversight, Coach Browning, Ms. Wenzel, they would do a presentation of the expenditures from the previous year for their budgets and their planned expenditures for the current year. In that same conversation, they can share with the fee oversight committee their concerns of whether their budget is sustainable based on costs. So that's where the conversation starts. From there, it's reported back to SGA, so SGA gets a report through the SGA officers of what was discussed at the fee oversight meetings. From that point, a senator in SGA, because this has to be led by a student senator, can decide to pursue a fee increase through a resolution, which I believe you all were given a copy of the resolution. That resolution is put on the floor at SGA, presented to the student body through that senator. There is discussion and debate at that initial presentation. And then the SGA senators are charged with taking that resolution back to their constituency. I wholeheartedly agree, Dr. Clark. We believe that some of them do that efficiently, some of them probably don't as well. Nevertheless, they're charged to do it. Then they come back within a week or 2 back to SGA, to the meeting. They discuss the information that they receive from their constituencies. It goes back before the SGA for discussion, debate, and then vote. And then once that vote is approved, legislation is signed by the appropriate SGA officers and turned over to the president's office to be turned over to you all.
Do y'all anticipate any kind of chilling effect on other possible fees that y'all may bring up or may come up? Because I'm looking at these things individually and what they are, but I'm also looking at them collectively and what the dollar amount is going to be. And so, again, we don't know what's going to happen next year or whatever, but it may be something else that is more, use the word universal or whatever, and maybe that's $15 more or $20 more or whatever. So I didn't know there was kind of a list of saying, hey, if you had to spend $50 to be assessed more, would you want this versus that instead of we're bringing it here and, yeah, okay, we'll vote for you because we like you, versus if you had a choice between this versus that, yeah, maybe I will vote. If I had to spend $50 and I say I want to assess that $50, what would I choose? From a student-wide population, I was just trying to wrap my head around how do you keep from a this and that versus you're bringing one item at a time and they start to accrue.
Right.
And then next thing you know, you do get an item that's maybe I consider more universal. And now we are back to Dr. Clark's point to where we're at the ceiling of fees assessed, and now you don't have room for something that may be universal.
Right, so if I follow you asking, like other fees that might need increases in the future?
Correct.
Again, I go back to that fee oversight meeting, and that's that opportunity for the custodians of those fees to talk about their need. You know, I sit in those meetings, I participate in them, and this year there wasn't any other areas that expressed that they have issues. Obviously, with these fees being generated by enrollment and the enrollment declines that we face, everybody is kind of in a tough situation, but other areas have a better opportunity to adapt versus, you know, the recreation center where we're dealing with what we have to do to attract student employees and paying them a wage that's high enough that stops them from going to Target or Walmart where they can make more money. And then everything you heard about the rodeo program and its costs and expenses. So, Sam, you want to speak more to that?
I would like to talk about that student fee oversight committee meeting. So that is run by the SGA treasurer, and every student assessed fee appears before this meeting. And I will tell you, we are very proactive with those fees. We came very close to cutting the debate fee this year, but because of their new leadership, we decided to leave it alone for at least another year. And we had a sizable rollover in our campus yearbook, and we went before the stewards of that fee and said, hey, this is what this fee was written for, you need to spend this money, and they are. So we are very active every year with our fees and monitoring them, and I believe the last time we came up for a fee was for the student union fee of, I think, early 2020. Yeah. So.
Mr. Chairman, it's just one more tidbit of information there. I apologize. Every university obviously structures their fees differently of clubs and organizations and all that kind of stuff. At ULM particularly, you know, we have a SAFE organization. So SAFE is Student Self-Assessed Enhancement Fee. And that is 17 different organizations compiled into one fee. I don't know if McNeese has that. I don't believe you guys do.
The closest we have to that is we have a student organization assessment that's governed by SGA, where student groups that are not assessed fees can petition to SGA for funding assistance.
Absolutely, and we do something very similar to that at ULM. SAFE is student ran, along with, you know, Vice President of Student Affairs and Business Affairs are all entailed in that as well. And like McNeese, organizations can make requests for funding from that SAFE committee, from that SAFE fee as well. So every university sort of structures on the fees differently than what McNeese may do.
Any other questions? So at this time, do we have any questions from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Stevens, we'll look at item J8 first.
Okay.
J6, I'm sorry. It's been a long conversation. I'm ready to get to the end.
I second.
So it's moved by Mr. Stevens, second by Dr. Clark. For item J6 be approved. Any other questions? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item J7.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Stevens. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Gill, thank you so much for doing Mr. Mesh's duties today and presenting these items to our board. And
Thank you all.
congratulations. Good luck with your vote. I happened to grow up with Mike Smith, so I will tell you, y'all have a world-renowned steer wrestler that's an alumni there, that's from New Iberia, and hopefully y'all can keep him involved and maybe get him to help you all generate some funds. There you go. Mr. Mesh?
Talk really fast.
Anybody doesn't, hey, if anybody doesn't understand, we do ask a lot of questions about fees.
Item J8 is a systems discussion of fiscal year 23 second quarter financial reports and ongoing assurances. In your materials, you'll see all of the quarterly financial reports I'll be discussing. The first report is a comparison of the operating budget versus actual revenues and expenditures through the second quarter ending December 31st, 2022. Campuses submit their quarterly financial reports to the system, and they provide explanations when revenues have not reached budget estimates and when expenditures have exceeded budget estimates. For revenues, no statutory dedicated revenues were drawn down in the first or second quarters. They'll be drawn down later in the year. Other revenues were 29% of budget. This is mostly because other revenues include contingent revenues and CARES funding, which are both not yet realized and intended to supplant lost enrollment revenues. On the next page is the expenditures presented by function. Scholarships and fellowships were 63% of budget. Campuses award scholarships to coincide with the fall and winter semesters, and this is normal and expected. The next page is expenditures presented by object. Travel was 62% of budget, and this is mostly related to more athletic travel occurring earlier in the year. Operating services was 63% of budget. Campuses pay for ORM insurance at the beginning of each fiscal year, and it's also related to an increase in utilities this year. Other charges and interagency expense was 62% of budget and is mostly related to summer, fall, and winter scholarships and exemptions. And library acquisitions expense was 70% of budget, which is reasonable because of the timing of purchases and subscription renewals. The next report is a current year to prior year comparison of actual revenues and expenditures for the quarters ended December 31st, 21 and 22. Campuses submit their quarterly financial reports to the system, and they provide explanations for any large variances. So for revenues, other revenues increased mostly because of the timing of transfers to the operating fund and an increase in interest income. On the next page, the expenditures presented by function. The increase in instruction expense is caused by faculty and staff pay increases. The decrease in institutional support is mostly related to the timing of payroll-related reclassifications and allocations, and other expense increase because of a timing difference of when insurance payments were made this fiscal year. The expenditures presented by object. Operating services increased mostly because of timing differences of when insurance payments were made and increases in insurance premiums and utilities. Next is the auxiliary operations and athletic summary. In their quarterly reports, campuses also report results of their auxiliary and athletic operations. The following are auxiliary and athletics revenues, expenses, and changes in fund balances projected through the end of the fiscal year. Campuses expect approximately $258 million in revenues, $286 million in expenses, and $17 million in net transfers in, which would result in an overall current year operating deficit of approximately $10.3 million and an ending positive fund balance of approximately $40 million. The next report shows athletic deficits. Although progress has been made by some campuses, some continue to have operating deficits in athletics. The second quarter ended December 2021 reflected a system-wide current year operating deficit of $12.9 million. And this second quarter ended December 22, the system reflected a total operating deficit of $11 million, which was a decline in the deficit of $1.8 million. The projected current year and cumulative deficits remained about the same from the prior quarter's projections. The following table shows the projected current year and cumulative fund balances for fiscal year 23. With their quarterly reports, campuses provide certifications of certain assurances about their operations. Campuses did not note any areas of immediate concern in their certifications, and all certifications and individual reports are available for review in the system office. And this is a report only, and no action by the board is necessary.
And this completes the discussion items, Mr. Romero.
Thank you. Thank both of you. Having considered this is discussion item only, you have no other business for this committee, and I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. And at this time, we'll move to our Personnel Committee. Chair Peterson will address those items.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We have 4 items on the Personnel Committee agenda today that are being presented on the consent agenda. Ms. Keisha Neal will provide an overview of today's items.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Good afternoon, Chair Pierre, Dr. Henderson, and board members. Item K1 is Nicholls State University's request for approval to appoint Dr. Raquel Ingolio as Dean for the College of Nursing effective January 9, 2023. Item K2, Southeastern Louisiana University's request for approval to appoint Dr. Claire Procopio as interim dean of the proposed College of Honors and Excellence effective March 1st, 2023. Item K3, University of New Orleans request for approval to appoint Dr. Carolyn Goals as Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students effective January 1, 2023. Item K4, University of New Orleans request for approval to appoint Ms. Mamie Gasparich as Vice President for Business Affairs effective March 1st, 2023. Mr. Peterson, that concludes the items to be considered today.
Thank you, Ms. Neal. These agenda items have been reviewed by staff and are recommended for approval. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? If no one requires further clarification, may I have a motion and a second for approval for the items listed? Item moved by Mr. Masada.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Letherman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I know we have at least one of the appointees here are present. You wanna
Yes,
bring-
sir. We have Dr. Ingolio here with Dr. Clune.
Dr. Clune, you want to come forward, please?
Thank you. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Raquel Ingolio to you as our newly appointed Dean for the College of Nursing at Nicholls State University. Anyone who's tried to hire a Dean of Nursing knows it's a very difficult task, and we got a great one in Dr. Ingolio. She had opportunity to witness firsthand the quality of Nicholls' nursing program when she was having a clinical experience in New Orleans. One day, she took a moment to speak to one of our nursing students who gave her a rave review of the program, the faculty, the university, and told her that Nicholls was growing, admitting 80 students each semester, and she should check it out. And she did, and the rest, as they say, is history. Dr. Ingolio joined the Nicholls nursing faculty in 2019. In her tenure at Nicholls, she served in the role of faculty, BSN program coordinator, department head for nursing, and now dean. She is incredibly focused on the program's growth and strategic planning, but also focused on the students and their success. She is a formidable advocate for excellence in nursing education. As most can attest, it takes the commitment of a family to achieve such milestones. We have in the audience Dr. Ingolio's husband, Mike. Back at home are her children, Emily, who's majoring in business at Nicholls, and her son, Everett, who's a junior in high school. So I present to you Dr. Ingolio as the Dean of the College of Nursing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you, members of the Board of Supervisors. And I would like to extend a thank you to Dr. Jay Clune and Dr. Sue Westbrook, President and Provost of Nicholls State University. I am grateful and humbled at this opportunity, and I am looking forward to serve our students and our community. As a Louisiana resident my entire life, and as a graduate of our local parish high schools and Orleans universities, I look forward to guiding our students in providing excellent health care for our region and our state. So I thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clune, and congratulations, Dr. Ingolio. That concludes the business of the Personnel Committee. Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Chair Peterson. And at this time, we'll move to our Legislation Committee. Dr. Clark, would you please lead us in that discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The regular session of the Louisiana Legislature begins April 10th, I believe, which is less than, 50 days away. Cami Geisman is here to provide, it says here, a brief overview of what to expect in the session. I'm expecting you to articulate each of the individual bills that have been filed and give us a prognostication as to whether or not they'll pass?
Yep. I know y'all want me to take my time. Thank you, Vice Chair Clark and Board of Supervisors, Dr. Henderson, thanks for having me. I will be fairly brief. The session does start April 10th. We'll wrap that up June 8th. We know some things, we don't know all things, but I'll try to give you a quick overview. So last week, the executive budget was released, and it's a great start. It's a great starting point, and we appreciate Governor Edwards and his constant, consistent support of higher education. His executive budget provides an additional $114.5 million for higher education throughout the state, not just our system. Notably, $18 million of that will go into the formula, and almost $40 goes into cost of living adjustments for faculty. And once again, those are state numbers, not our system. Also important is that there is a $900 million surplus in the current budget. Those are dollars that are up for grabs for one-time expenditures, and so we will be working hard to get at least half, right? I think we could get at least half of that. But our advocacy overall will be largely driven by encouraging additional investments in our system, both capital improvements and operational spending. And, as a product of our work in the past couple years, you see Southeastern's main academic building, D. Vickers Hall, is out for construction bid. Their nursing building upgrades in Baton Rouge, a new nursing building in Hammond. They're all in that process. The nursing building at Nichols for our new dean, that is in architect selection. McNeese has $60 million worth of projects. Some of those are FEMA projects, but a lot of that capital outlay projects are in some part of the kind of funnel of how those projects go. And then, of course, UL Lafayette's New Iberia Research Center, and that's just some of them. And we'll be working to advance some of those projects, new projects. So stay tuned for when that starts in April.
Cami, not to interrupt, but there's also a groundbreaking coming up for Alice Hall.
Alice Hall at Northwestern, I think March 14th, 15th, yes. And we talked about some of that this morning as well with Mark Moses. There are 45 bills filed. Luckily, I don't have to go through all of them. None of them, only one of them really is related to higher ed, and it's about the Board of Regents meeting timeline. So y'all don't have to worry about that. But we do expect some relevant bills to come up about higher education. We've heard whispers of a bill related to tenure. We don't know what that's going to look like. We see a national narrative on CRT, divisive topics, that kind of thing. We expect that there could be, we expected that last year as well, there could be a bill that and basically our promises will be present and be part of the conversation. We've been meeting with legislators. We've had a lot of really nice meetings with legislators. We constantly hear that they're going to support our institutions, our system. Of course, we benefit greatly by our geographic reach, but truthfully, they believe in what we're doing. And so I look forward to more meetings in the coming weeks with leadership. And most importantly for y'all, mark your calendars. UL System Day is April 26th, and that is the day before board meetings, so we tried to make that easy on y'all for one trip to Baton Rouge. It'll be similar to last year's on the lawn of the Pentagon Barracks, and hopefully we'll have some other events for you to attend as well.
I understand there may be a crawfish boil off of Highland Road that evening.
Yes, the boss's crawfish, which I've never had, but I'm not inviting myself, obviously. Okay. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Cami, thank you as always, and sincerely appreciate your enthusiasm, your knowledge, your acumen. I know that Dr. Henderson commends you often. I think that as board members, we feel the same as he does. So it's not easy to work in the legislature or around the legislature.
I appreciate it, and it's my honor. It's really fun, and I'm constantly learning, which is appreciated. So, thank you.
Well, this is a report only. No action is required by the board. Are there any questions from the board and or from the public at this time? All right, hearing none, I guess that concludes the business of the Legislation Committee.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. At this time, we'll move to our president's report. Dr. Henderson, would you please present your report?
Thank you, Madam President. So the board members, you were emailed campus personnel actions for review. The staff has also reviewed these requests, recommends approval. Madam Chair, we'll need a motion and a second for that.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Romero, second by Mr. Stevens. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That motion is approved.
Thank you, members. Members, we have a number of events coming up this spring. We'd love for you to be a part of them, and of course, you'll get much more formal invitations soon. One this may not be on your radar yet is the Free Expression Summit. On March 16th, we will host a summit on free expression on college campuses in Lafayette. Let me rephrase that. We're going to host a summit on free expression on college campuses on one campus in Lafayette, at UL Lafayette. It's very inartful. This event is designed to engage all of higher education at the request of Representative Chuck Owen, who has been a prominent supporter of free expression, regardless of ideologies. He authored the most recent legislation guiding free expression on our campuses. We'll have 2 engaging panel discussions with ample opportunity for audience participation. We'd love for you to participate if you are able. Formal invitations will be sent out next week. The 5th annual For Our Future Conference is just over a month away. This year's conference hosted by McNeese and the rodeo program. It'll be March 26th through the 28th. Most of the activities are scheduled for the Golden Nugget Hotel and Casino in Lake Charles, so bring extra cash. It has ample space for this year's gathering. We think it'll be our biggest yet. We hope your schedule allows for you to attend this year's conference. I know you've already received registration information about attending, and if you plan to participate and whether you'll stay overnight, please let Carol know. This year's Academic Summit will be hosted by Northwestern State University in historic Natchitoches, Louisiana. The annual event is a celebration of academic excellence at our institutions. It encompasses our system-wide service learning conference, along with student presentations in the area of visual arts, artistic performances, undergraduate poster presentations. I'm still learning from the Grambling students that presented a few years ago on formaldehyde in telephone poles, and a student from Nichols that was reporting on multi-drug resistant cancer cells. All these things are part of the academic pursuits that we're engaged in, and I promise you, when you talk with a student that's passionate about research, you will be moved. Summit will be held on Thursday, April 20th and Friday, April 21st. The registration information will be emailed to you in the coming weeks. If you'll recall, we have a partnership with Academic Honors Network. This is a local organization that helps expose high school students, high-achieving students in the community to state colleges and universities. The organization helps this group of students secure scholarships. University of Louisiana system institutions will all participate in the Academic Honors College Fair, which will be held in Baton Rouge on Thursday, March 9th from 9 o'clock until 1 p.m. It's always been a successful event, and I'm sure this event will be as worthwhile. Glad to be back in person with this group. You also are aware of our partnership with the 100 Black Men of Baton Rouge, and we're planning to have a virtual college fair for their students and parents. Because of the student schedules, the 100 preferred the virtual mode for this event. It'll be held on Saturday, March 18th, and from 9 o'clock until noon. If you're interested in attending any of these events, please let Dr. Erica Calais know, and she'll help with the logistics. Looking a little bit further ahead to the first day of summer, we will be in New Orleans for the 3rd annual Black Male Summit. You probably have that date on your calendar because June 22nd is our June board meeting, so we tried to make it easy for you. We'll meet at the Hilton Riverside in New Orleans before joining Black Male Summit program. For our keynote speaker and a dear friend of our system and higher education in general, Congressman Troy Carter. He'll help us introduce our 3rd cohort of Reginald F. Lewis scholars. Speaking of the scholars, the first week of April, the first cohort of scholars will be joining us and at least 20 investors in our program for a trip to Paris. We will be attending lectures at Sorbonne. We will visit Versailles. We will have a number of meals hosted by Sodexo, who is one of our dining partners at many of our institutions. Most of you may not know Sodexo Global is headquartered in Paris. So they will have a Seine River tour. They will have lunch at the Eiffel Tower for the scholars. They'll also show how one of our own graduates, Ron Guillory, has achieved remarkable success as the vice president of Sodexo. He's the one that's leading this partnership. It's all of our dining partners, Aramark, Chartwells, and Sodexo, and of course Sodexo Magic, have contributed to support this program. covering meal plans for these scholars. But when they go above and beyond, like Ron and Sodexo are in Paris, that is worthy of recognition. The 20 sponsors that will be joining us have all given so much to support this program that I dare say is some of the most transformational work I've ever seen. And I want to thank Claire Norris and everyone that's involved in leading this program. When I say it's the most transformational, personally transformational, as much as it's transformational for the scholars. We couldn't do any of this without partnerships. And while we're here, we were on the campus of Grambling State University this morning. Of course, we're on the campus of Louisiana Tech today. Rick Gallo was recently in Salt Lake, and I hope you got to see the game on Saturday. As associated with NBA All-Star is HBCU Classic, where Grambling played Southern in Utah in an epic matchup. Of course, the Tigers won. Congratulations for that. But part of that program, $100,000 was donated to each school from the NBA and one of our dear friends, AT&T. That caught my eye, as did another donation from AT&T to Louisiana Tech in February. This was a $20,000 donation to advance digital literacy in this area. I bring those two to your attention simply because these partnerships are what drive everything we do. We've talked about the state disinvestment that occurred in higher education and how much of that was borne on the backs of students. But so much has been contributed by our partners and allows us to do things at scale, allow us to do life-transforming work like travel abroad. And I wanted to bring AT&T up simply because of the contemporary nature of those two wonderful donations. Lastly, through Louisiana Tech, the system has partnered with a great partner of ours that in a growing partnership, Coursera, to offer Google certificates to UL system faculty and staff. Partnership includes 3 completely online pathways that lead to Google certification in 6 areas: project management, digital marketing and e-commerce, data analytics, Mr. Stevens' favorite, UX design. He can explain that later, the UX design, IT support and IT automation. Coursera is a partner that is on the really, truly the cutting edge in educational delivery and the certifications, and they are a force multiplier for us. They allow us to leverage resources to achieve at high levels, and this investment in our faculty and staff is going to bear great benefits for us. So I want to thank our partners from Coursera. Madam Chair, the last thing on my agenda is a report of the Southeastern Louisiana Presidential Search Committee. The committee met last week for its first meeting. It was held on campus in Hammond, attracted more than 100 attendees in the audience, several of whom provided public comment on the qualities they would like to see in the university's next leader. The committee also approved a timeline as well as a job advertisement. And based on the initial meeting, we have an incredibly caring and engaged committee to assist the board in this process. It was a very healthy conversation. We're accepting nominations and resumes through March 24th, and the next meeting of the committee is scheduled for April 11th. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henderson. Now for the board chair's report. We begin our annual board retreat after this meeting. We are excited to be together and take the opportunity to learn more about the system, legislation, and higher education. All of this gives us insight into how we can support and manage the system to the best of our ability. Thank you, Dr. Henderson and Dr. Khan, particularly for providing us these worthy tools. Our next board meeting will be April 27th in Baton Rouge. Is there any further business to come before this board at this time? Hearing then, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Ms. Donahoe, second by Mr. Davidson. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Board members will have lunch, and then we'll go for the retreat in the press box.